Hey everybody, it's Cave Cat again, here to bring you another exciting episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. For today's episode, it's time to go back to 1997 once again, talking about another show that aired during Disney's One Saturday Morning on ABC. The last time I reviewed a show from that block was when I talked about Recess for episode 26, but now it's time for me to talk about this show. The show in question? Science Court. For those who don't know, Science Court is an edutainment show that was created by Burns and Burns Productions in association with Tom Snyder's company, Tom Snyder Productions, now known as Soup to Nuts, which was more known for producing various educational video games using an animation style called Squiggle Vision. Of course, both companies also created Dr. Katz Professional Therapist and Home Movies, which were more adult-oriented, whereas Science Court was more geared towards kids. Anyway, the show focuses on the titular Science Court, where its motto is where science is the law and scientific thinking rules. Yeah, you're gonna hear that phrase a lot throughout the series. So anyway, the main characters of the series are attorneys Allison Krimple and Doug Savage, along with Judge Stone and stenographer Fred. The main premise of the show is that in each episode, there would be a lawsuit that would arise depending on the topic of the episode. In fact, this show is actually similar to the Magic School Bus, since both shows focus on teaching different scientific topics. But while the Magic School Bus took place at school, Science Court actually takes place in court, being that it seemed to be inspired by various courtroom dramas like Perry Mason, LA Law, and Matlock. In fact, the reason for Science Court being on ABC's One Saturday Morning block was because of the fact that TV networks were now required to have some form of educational material in their programming, especially on Saturday mornings, as I mentioned before in some of my previous reviews. Being that the show is all about teaching science, they actually covered a lot of subjects, such as the water cycle, using simple machines, gravity, inertia, sound, the probability of statistics, molecules, heat absorption, electric currents, soil, the classification of living and non-living things, the seasons, fossils, and many others. Granted, the Magic School Bus did also cover most of those subjects, but I don't think they ever did episodes talking about seasons or pendulums or even magnets. Well, maybe in the books, but I don't think in the animated series. As I mentioned before, each episode focuses on a problem getting kickstarted thanks to a certain scientific topic, which results in the offending victim threatening to sue the other person by taking them to science court. So now, both Allison Krimple and Doug Savage have to make rather convincing arguments regarding the subject and why the corresponding problem happened the way it did. The main characters, as I keep saying in a lot of my reviews, really liven up the show with their own personalities and quirks. Allison Krimple is intelligent, humble, down-to-earth, and has a rather no-nonsense attitude most of the time. Doug Savage is the opposite of Allison, being that he's rather brash, ignorant, obnoxious, arrogant, and apathetic to the scientific topic at hand. So he's basically a lot like Socrates from Adventures from the Book of Virtues. There's also Judge Stone, who makes it her job to keep order in the courtroom, like every other good judge always does, even if she can sometimes get exasperated at times. And there's stenographer Fred, who acts as the court's stenographer, as his name implies, while also providing some good quips during the trial sessions as well. Aside from the main characters, we also get other recurring characters throughout the series, such as Allison's young assistant Tim, who can actually make some pretty good points, Michaela, Doug's assistant, who is more intelligent and competent than he is, I. M. Richmond, the resident millionaire who oftentimes finds himself at the receiving end of a science-related problem, J.C. Cramwood, the city's only residential movie star with a rather high opinion of himself, Shep Sherman, a rather nerdy guy who works some odd jobs around town, and Clara Swindell, not Swindle, a female con artist who tries to make a quick buck by scamming people or making ridiculous requests. And of course, there's also other characters in this series, such as child academics Dr. Julie Bean and Dr. Felix Foltergast, who are both called in at separate occasions to explain to Doug Savage about various scientific phenomena, and Professor Parsons, who is called upon by Allison Krimple to use science to better explain the scientific topic at hand in order to discredit Doug Savage's ridiculous explanations, even if Parsons himself does have a bit of a goofy sense of humor. Also, fun fact for you, the guy who voiced Professor Parsons in the series actually went on to voice Bob Belcher in Bob's Burgers. And although Science Court is more kid-oriented, it's not without its share of occasional adult humor, because occasionally they'll slip in an adult joke that a lot of kids are not going to get. In fact, you might say that the humor of Science Court actually predates that of Bob's Burgers by 13 years, but at least it doesn't go too far with its humor like Bob's Burgers or even Home Movies or Dr. Katz. Starting with the second season, the show actually underwent a few changes. First off, they changed the show's title to Squiggle Vision, which was the animation style used for the show, as I mentioned before. Second, they introduced two new characters who appeared in bookend segments that were added at the beginning and end of new episodes. Those characters being two weird creatures named Fizz and Martina, who serve as the hosts of their own television studio as they introduce and sign off the show. Of course, that came at the cost of having to shorten the episodes that did air during the second season, as well as cutting out some parts of the first season episodes when they were reran during that time. Also, I thought that Fizz and Martina were okay characters. They didn't really add anything of significance to the series. Then, when the third season came around, another thing that changed was the fact that instead of hosting the show in a TV station, Fizz and Martina now hosted it in a space station. However, while the first season had the proverbial 13 episodes, both the second and third seasons had only 8 episodes each. A lot of these episodes from the second and third seasons are incredibly hard to find, especially on YouTube, much like what happened with the original PBS airings of the first and second seasons of Adventures from the Book of Virtues. Also, in the third season of the show, the kid who played Tim had gone through puberty, so instead of replacing Tim's voice actor, the producers decided that they would have Tim go through puberty as well. That's actually a very good choice, I must admit, that they would have Tim keep his original voice actor instead of replacing him once he ended up going through puberty, because it's a great way to show the viewers that even the characters of a TV show can go through changes as well. The show did have a pretty good run during the One Saturday Morning years, up until it ended up getting the axe after the third season ended in January 2000. Maybe it is best that the show ended right there, rather than try to turn it into a carbon copy of the Magic School Bus. Not that I have a problem with the Magic School Bus, mind you. And despite the fact that the show had a lot of fun with teaching the various scientific topics that were presented in each episode, Variety magazine actually opined that the show tried too hard to make science entertaining, which would make it come across as being too complicated for its target audience. And yeah, now that I think about it, I could definitely see why that is, being that sometimes the juxtaposition of the courtroom setting with the premise of teaching science can sometimes confuse younger viewers. But despite this, I had absolutely zero problems with watching the show when it aired on ABC when I was younger, because I actually enjoyed learning about science from the show. After rewatching a lot of episodes of the series, I think it's safe to say that I actually enjoyed Science Court as much as I did when I watched it years ago. So I think you all know what that means. It gets 8.5 stars from me. Yes, the show may seem a little bit strange with the limited movements of the squiggle vision animation style used. Yes, it did try a bit too hard to try and make science fun and entertaining for younger kids. And yes, the changes that came to the show in the second season and third season were rather mixed, but at least they're not as bad as the changes that were made to other shows that I've reviewed in the past, like Adventures from the Book of Virtues, VeggieTales, The Real Ghostbusters, Scooby-Doo, or even Superbook. But I do have to say that out of all the shows that aired during the One Saturday Morning block, I really enjoyed the show quite a bit, even alongside Doug, Recess, and even Pepper Ann. A show like Science Court is sorely needed for this day and age because we really need more educational shows that not only teach children about different subjects, but can also make learning fun and entertaining for all ages. Most edutainment shows these days are just too watered down and too kiddie for a lot of people's tastes. So we need an educational show like Science Court to not only make learning fun, but also with a good mix of fun and occasional adult humor to really give it that right amount of pizzazz. I mean, VeggieTales was able to mix in some tongue-in-cheek humor when teaching children about God, and Science Court was definitely able to mix in that tongue-in-cheek humor as well, while teaching children about science, aside from the comparisons that I've been making to the Magic School Bus. But I've gone about that long enough, so there. Anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed this episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. Once more, be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for future episodes or other videos from me. So until next time, see you in the future. Man, I just keep fumbling here, don't I?